Hey everybody, it's Mr. Hale here. So today we're looking at writing equations of lines. So before we were graphing equations of lines, and now what we are doing is writing equations of lines. So all of our answers are going to be in the form of y equals mx plus b today. Before we get to that, let's just review how to find the slope if we're given 2 points. So let's remember from before that slope is m, and that's y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. All right, that's rise over run. So if we look at A, we want to label the first one as x1, y1, and the second one is x2, y2. So x is the first coordinate and y is the second coordinate, and these little numbers down here are called subscripts, and they represent the point. So this number 1 represents the first point, and the number 2 represents the second point. So if we just go ahead and plug that into the formula, we're going to get 7 minus 7 over 4 minus 2, which equals 0 over 2, which equals 0. All right, so it has a slope of 0, which from before we should know that that means we're going to have a horizontal line. All right, let's move on to B. B is a little different, so we're going to look at x1, y1, x2, y2. If we plug straight into the formula, we get 5 minus a negative 3 and 1 minus a negative 1. So this gives us 8 over 2, which is 4. So it has a slope of 4. You can think of that as 4 over 1. This is going to be an example of a diagonal line. If we look at the last one, we get x1, y1, x2, y2. We do 7 minus 3 over 2 minus 2. Uh-oh, what happens here? We get 4 in the numerator, but we get 0 in the denominator. This does not equal 0. This is an undefined slope. So we would say undefined. If it's an undefined slope, that actually is going to mean that it's a vertical line. We will talk more about that later. So realize or notice the 3 different types of lines we have: horizontal, diagonal, and vertical. All right, so let's move on to the next one. And what we're really, that was a review. So now another review. Slope-intercept form of a line. We can see that that's y equals mx plus b. The m, which this arrow is pointing to, represents the slope, and the b represents the y-intercept. We should know that from before. Before, though, we were given this. So actually, let's move on to the next one. We were given, say, something that looks like this, and you were asked to graph it. Now this is actually going to be what your answer looks like. But let's just review really quickly. This means that the slope is 3, and the y-intercept, I'm going to write it as a coordinate, is 0, 7. Notice the 7 comes from right here. On the second one, the slope of this one is negative 4 over 3, and the y-intercept is 0, negative 6. So just notice the information that we're able to extract just from the equation, and think about working backwards now. Now we would say be given this information, and we'd have to come up with this equation. That's what we're working on today. So after that quick review, let's look at some of our examples. Here, the slope is negative 3, and the y-intercept is 0, negative 5. So our job is to write the equation. So it's got to be y equals, let's actually up here, everything should be in y equals mx plus b. So m is negative 3, and b is negative 5. So this is your answer. All of your answers should have a y in it and an x in it, and the m and b, we should figure out what they are. This is a very simple one because it just tells us. So really quickly, this second one, if the slope is 5 over 6, I have 5 over 6x, and this right here, the y-intercept is represented by 2, and it's positive 2. So this is my answer. This is the easiest possible way that you could be asked, to do a question like this. All the information is given to you right there. Let's move on to the next one, where all of the information is not given. Notice in this problem, they give us the slope, but they don't give us the y-intercept. So here's one where we actually have to do some work. So we're going to start with y equals mx plus b. Then we're going to go y equals negative 3 over 4 x plus b. Negative 3 over 4 is the slope, so I can plug that in. But I don't know the y-intercept. But what I am given is a point. And this means that x is 8 and y is 3. So let's go ahead and replace y with 3 and x with 8. So now what you notice is that we could solve for b. And the way we're going to solve for b is we are first going to multiply. So one thing I could do here is 8 times 3 is 24. 24 over 4 is 6. Or 8 divided by 4 is 2. 2 times 3 is 6. Either way, I get 6, and there's a negative. So this should be negative 6. 3 over 4 times 8 is 6. Either way you want to do it is fine. All right. So again, the way I like to do it is do this part first, which is dividing. 8 divided by 4 is 2. And then multiply that 2 by negative 3, and you get negative 6. Now to solve for b, I add 6 to both sides, and I get 9. So this means our y-intercept is 9. So my final answer is y equals negative 3 over 4 x plus 9. We plugged in 8 for x and 3 for y, but that was only for this one little instance, just so we could solve for b. Our overall answer should look like this, where we have an x and a y, but we've replaced m and b. So all of your answers today and in class tomorrow, your answers should all look like this. All right, let's move on to another type. Now we're given, let's put hours at the end of this, it should have. Now what you're given is a graph. All right, so before you were given some information, now you're just given a graph and you have to extract that same information. So we need to know, what does m equal and what does b equal? Well, I think the easiest thing by looking at the graph is you could just find b. B is going to be the y-intercept. And I've just circled it right there. That is negative 5. So the first thing you want to do if you see a graph, find the y-intercept. You can look right at it and write it down. Now I got to know m. Well, m is the slope. So what I would do is follow along the line and locate somewhere. This could be a little tricky. I would say here. Locate a point that is, integers. Meaning, like if I look at, say, randomly this point down here, you can see that's kind of in between the blue background, the crosshairs in the back, which each point represents an integer. That's in between, and that's decimal. So let's find one that's right on, like a blue background. So I want to find the slope, so I'm going to count. I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4 over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that means I went up 4 and right 6. Well, this could also be 2 over 3. And notice, I could have picked this point. That would have been up 1, 2 over 3. So it gives me the same answer. So what I was trying to illustrate was that if you pick a point that's really far away and there was one that was actually closer, you'll still end up with the same answer because the ratio, the slope, doesn't change. So 4 over 6 is 2 over 3. Now I can easily write my equation. Y equals 2/3 x minus 5. And that's your answer. So again, all of our answers today are in slope-intercept form, and our answers are actually the equation of the line. Whereas before, that's what we were starting with to graph. In this lesson, our answers are going to actually look like this. Let's move on to the next type. The next type is a little more tricky. I'm going to do A. I'll save B for you at home. If you have questions, you can come ask us. But what we're going to do for A is we have to do a little more work. Probably the most amount of work we're going to have to do is something like this. They give us 2 points. So they don't, right now, they don't give us the slope, and they don't give us the y-intercept. So all of the information is unknown at this point. We're not starting off with any information. But the slope we can find because we know the slope formula. So I have x1, y1, x2, y2. If I plug it into the formula, I get -1 minus 5 over 2 minus a -2. This gives me -6 over 4, which equals -3 over 2. Make sure you reduce. So now I know the slope. So I'm halfway there. I got my slope, which tells me if I stop the problem now, I would have y equals -3 over 2x plus b. But I don't know b. So the goal is to find b. If you think back to the example we had before, to find b, we plugged in a value for x and a value for y, and they gave us a point. Well, in this problem, they give us 2 points. Well, that means that we could just use either point, because you can use any point that's on the line, and it's saying that the line goes through both of these points. So let me just pick the first one. So the first one, I'm going to plug in 5 for y. Notice 5 is the y value. And I'm going to plug in -2 for x. Let's get this other problem out of the way. And now we're going to solve for b. So the first thing I need to do is, what I like to do is divide first. -2 over 2 is equal to -1. I'm going to take that -1 and multiply by -3, and it's going to give me a +3. Subtract 3 from both sides, and I'm going to get 2 equals b. So now I know b, and I know the slope. So I can write my answer as, your last step is to always take the information that you found and write the equation of the line. Again, all your answers should be in slope-intercept form. So y equals -3 over 2x plus b, which is 2. So plus 2, and that's how I write my final answer. Before you move on to the next one, let me just show you what would happen if we had to pick the other point. So let's say I decided to use this point. I still know that the slope was -3 over 2. So let's say I was trying to find b and I used the point 2, -1. This would tell me that -1 would be y. Oops. We're using 2 for x. So what this means is, again, you don't have to do this. I'm just showing you that if you had to pick the other point, you would have still ended up with the right answer. All right, so right now you have your answer. Your answer is this right here. So just follow along. -1 equals, these 2's right here actually divide to equal 1. So you get -3 plus b. And if you add 3 to both sides, wow, look what happens. -1 plus 3 is 2 equals b. And that is the same answer you got from before. And obviously we have the same slope. So regardless of which point you decide to plug in to solve for b, you will still get the same answer. All right, so I'd like you to try b at home as practice. And what we're going to do is move on. And we just have a couple more slides and we are finished. This slide is a graphic organizer, so what I would like you to do is just write all these down. We're going to do this again in class if you do not get a chance to do it here. We're going to start with writing an equation of a line in slope-intercept form. That's what we did today. The first thing is imagine you're given a graph. We did this. The first thing you do when you're given a graph is you locate the y-intercept. That's the easiest thing to find. Then you count the slope, meaning you count up and over, down and over, all right, depending on which way the line is sloping. Be careful whether it's positive or negative. The last thing you're going to do is substitute for m and b, so your final answer will be in y equals mx plus b form. If I'm moving too fast, just pause it and write these down. The next thing you could be given is the slope and a point. So in this case, what we did was we just substituted the point and slope into the equation. So the slope is given and the point is given. Then you're going to solve for b, and your final, which was always the last thing to do, is you substitute for m and b. The other type of problem, the third type, is if you're given 2 points. So this one was the longest problem. What we did first was we found the slope, or we computed it using the slope formula, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Then we substitute a point into the equation. Notice it says a point. It could be either point. Then you're going to solve for b, and the last thing, like all of them, you're going to substitute for m and b. So after you write all this down, I would like you to use this as a little cheat sheet. You can't use it on a test, but you should be using it on all the problems that we do in class to help you understand, all right, I'm given a graph, so I'm going to follow this left column. Or, oh, they gave me a slope and a point, so I'm going to follow the middle column. Or, oh, they gave me 2 points, so I'm going to follow the right column. And if you follow these steps, eventually you'll just be able to do all these very quickly, considering the answers pretty much all look the same. All right, and let's just move on to our last slide. Of course, we have these special cases we have to deal with. And the first one is horizontal lines. We talked about this before. If it's a horizontal line, it means the slope is 0. We actually talked about this in the beginning. And the answer is y equals a number. So for instance, y equals 5 or y equals -8. We talked about this before with graphing. It was just on your last test. So you should know that a horizontal line is always y equals. The opposite is a vertical line. Vertical lines are undefined slope. We talked about that in the beginning. So when you get an undefined slope, you know it's a a vertical line. And that's always x equals a number. We talked about that. We've graphed things like x equals 7 and x equals -3. They are vertical lines. So notice this time, though, we are working backwards. We're not graphing. We're coming up with the answer. So if the slope is 0, we know right away it's going to be y equals some number. Well, what number does y equal? 3. Once you recognize a special case, you should be happy because these ones have the least amount of work. All right? So, notice this one. The line goes through the points 2, 5, and 2, 7. Well, the first thing we do, if you look back at the page before, if they give you 2 points, the first thing to do is compute the slope. So that means I got to do 7 minus 5 over 2 minus 2. Well, this gives me 2 over 0, which is an undefined slope. If it's undefined, that tells me the answer is going to be in the form of x equals some number. Well, what does x equal? X equals 2. So you're done. All right, so notice these aren't really in slope-intercept form because they are special cases. But again, if you notice a special case, it's actually easier for you because there's no work to do except just write out y equals a number or x equals a number. Notice the x values were the same and the answer was x equals 2. So let's see if we can do letter C without doing any work at all. Notice they have the same y value. Well, therefore, the answer must be y equals 3. If you did 3 minus 3, you'd get 0 in the numerator of the slope. 0 divided by anything is 0. So since the slope is 0, it'd be y equals a number, and y equals 3. So if you notice that the coordinate is the same, you do not have to figure out the slope. If the x-coordinate's the same, it's x equals that number. If the y-coordinate's the same, like this, it's y equals that number. Last type of problem. They tell you the slope is undefined automatically. X equals some number, and all you need to do is go over and say, what is the x coordinate? In this case, it's -2. So your answer is x equals -2. So for special cases, this is also another sheet you should keep, because if you ever have a special case, it's either going to be y equals a number or x equals a number. All right? So that is it for today. Hopefully we understand this. Please come tomorrow to class with questions, and me and Miss Scott will see you tomorrow in class. Good luck.